Kaieteur Radio.
Covering Guyana from coast to coast.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Berbice 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
It is 19 hours 30 all across Guyana. In Guyana, it is time to enter room 592 where we unleash the truth with Dr. Yog Mahadio alongside his co-host Mr. Leonard Gildari, senior journalist of Kaieteur News. And this evening, their esteemed guest, the wonderful Rondell Lam, alongside what looks like a bit of a stranger with him sporting his dreadlocks this evening, Mr. Sanjeev Dattadin. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
There's dreadlocks in the house?
You know, I tell you, Kevin has stolen the thunder from us here. Now we have to get him to do, you know what the guy used to do when he said, let's get ready to rumble? Kevin has to do this every day now. So, thank you so much, Kevin. And good evening, viewers, listeners from all across Guyana, Caribbean, United States, UK, Canada, wherever you're joining us from. To our friends in Minneapolis, Minnesota, New York, New Mexico, to our friends in New Zealand that joined us last night. We certainly hope to see you tonight, and from all across the world, Hong Kong. And of course, surprise, surprise, you know, we have persons from Brazil, Suriname, and elsewhere here. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to room 592, where we unleash the truth. As I've said before, it seems like truth is a stranger to some people in Guyana. I don't know if they took an attorney. Well, obviously they took a number of attorneys to get a divorce from truth. Any inkling of truth, any iota of truth seems far, far away from a handful of persons that is so intent on power at all costs that they are willing to do anything, even if it means a blatant, repetitive rigging of these elections. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start to analyze the latest shameless display of rigging by APNO AFC, I want to remind you all that as of today, 130 days have passed since our 2020 elections. 4 reports, famous and infamous reports, were submitted, significant ones. There are many reports submitted, but there were 4 significant reports that were submitted, all of them fraudulent. The first report by Mr. Mingo was criticized, was laughed at by the entire world. And that first report by Mingo was very different from the second report he submitted. In the second report, Mingo stole 19,000. He created, he manufactured, he stole, I don't know which graveyard he went to, but he gave Mr. Granger 19,000 dead men walking votes. He gave APNO AFC 19,000 false, fraudulent votes. 100 days later, 103 days later, Lowenfield submitted another report. This is report number 3. That is very different from both of Mingo's earlier report. And today, ladies and gentlemen, Lowenfield has Mingoized the numbers, and he has declared or given another report. This one has burnt away over 115,000 votes. I want to remind you all, men and women, you stood in the hot sun at the polling stations across this country and you cast your votes. And Lowenfield and Mingo and their employees decided on their own. We know who paid them off, but they decided to take that money and to tell the polling areas to keep the documents outside of the box, to put it separately. The same Mingo was the overall returning officer for Region 4. They obviously knew what they were up to. And today, all of those areas where Mingo and his deputy gave instructions for the documents to not be within the box, Lowenfield has decided he will burn those votes. As David Hines said a little while ago, burn the ballots. Well, we have seen what Hines probably meant weeks ago, because today Lowenfield has presented a report in which he has decided to burn away 115 votes in favor. By burning it away, he has passed the favor on to Granger once again. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Granger said 2 or 3 weeks ago, what is rigging? I don't like the word rigging. Why are you using this word rigging? But Mr. Granger, describe it with whatever word you want. Y'all did it in the 1970s. Y'all did it in the 1980s. And you are doing it again. This is rigging country, rigging capital of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, in room 592, there is no spin. We unleash the truth. And to discuss what are the real facts and to expose this rigging, I would like to welcome my co-host, Mr. Leonard Gildari, Miss Rhonda Ann Lam, and of course, attorney at law, Mr. Sanjeev Dattadin. And I wish to remind you all, Mr. Dattadin is joining us here today as an attorney at law. Ms. Lam is joining us today, not necessarily as a political figure, but as a citizen who voted and did not want to see what is happening here today, as well as, of course, keeping her political hat on as well. And of course, Mr. Gildari, who, as a senior journalist, might have lived through the 1980s and would have probably been a small boy, a young boy, never realized that he would experience rigging as blatantly as this in his lifetime. Leonard, welcome to this rigging capital of the world, Guyana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yog Mahathir, and of course, Ms. Rhonda Lam and Councillor Sanjeev Dattadin. I hope that you guys bring us some highlights as to some of the developments today. I left the newsroom a short while ago, Yog, and what we told is that the Caribbean Court of Justice is prepared, or they've indicated, or it was indicated that the Caribbean Court of Justice will be granting a stay until July the 1st from tomorrow. So that was what I was told by the reporters there. Of course, the big question that is being asked now is whether Mr. Keith Lowenfield would have acted in contempt by submitting the report today. So maybe you could get the ball rolling with that, Yog.
Correct. And I want to immediately, before asking Mr. Dattadin to delve into the legal side and to answer your question, I want to remind viewers and listeners, this is the same Lowenfield, you know. The same gentleman 2 days ago that received word that a motion was being filed. In that case, he decided to wait. Yet, the same Lowenfield on the 15th of March didn't wait. While everybody was searching him to serve him, he didn't wait. And today again, we see that same man in action. Mr. Lowenfield, you, sir, you represent all that is wrong in Guyana today. Rhonda Ann Lam, if your face tells us how you feel, what would your words say? Because your face is extremely serious and it tells me you're not in a happy mood at all.
I don't think I've been happy for many months. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and every day that this election 2020 is, we don't come to a resolution, it's one more day for our people to be suffering. And I can tell you this because I've been in the field, I've been there. I'm seeing it every day as I go about, every day as I try to assist. So my face is reflected on the things I've seen today, the things I've heard, the numbers that keep changing every single time, a new report comes out. Votes that were not valid 2 weeks ago are suddenly valid 2 weeks later, days later. And remember last week when I was here, I said we'd be in court, and y'all laughed at me and you said, no man, let's be hopeful, let's be optimistic. And here we are. This is who we are as a people. We are still at that point where, 113 days later, we still do not have a conclusion to an election that ultimately, should be over by now. It should have been over 113 days ago. It is not. And like you said, my face tells you exactly how I feel. Our people are struggling. Our people are suffering. This has to end. but it also has to end reflecting the will of the people. So
Correct.
that's where I'm at.
Correct. Thank you for that, Rhonda and Lam. And whilst attorney gets himself settled down in the lights, Leonard, today you and I were talking, and Rhonda and Sanjeev, and ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are joining us on the daytime program today, we had a few callers calling and were in tears. People are starving. People do not have food to eat. I am part of a wonderful team, as Rhonda is, and we go out there and we share food and we distribute stuff, and you see children, and it brings tears to your eyes as to the type of country we become. And you go and you look at social media and you see the cheerleaders of APNU AFC gloating over fraud, gloating over the stolen fruit, gloating. But ladies and gentlemen, the tears of our children will have a telling effect upon your soul. Brothers and sisters, it is true, we remain optimistic, but consistently we have said, ultimately we knew it would come down to one person and one person only, the chairman of GCOM, Madam Claudette Singh. Where that leaves us, we don't know. But I want to bring on Mr. Sanjeev Dattadin. Sanjeev, welcome to this program. And sir, as of last night, would you have thought that this would be the state of play today?
Good evening, Yo. Good evening, Ray. Good evening to your viewers, Leonard. Good evening to my beautiful wife. Nothing surprises me anymore, Yo. I think that the position that we are in now is really only indicative of the deterioration that we've been experiencing and we're witnessing right before our eyes. I didn't think that honestly, the Court of Appeal had jurisdiction. The Court of Appeal took jurisdiction. What the Court of Appeal essentially was that votes cast meant valid votes cast. Now, that in itself is not particularly unusual and should not have been the cause for the sort of celebration and the press releases that we saw from APNU and the Prime Minister's office. What were they meaning all along? And what were they counting all along if it weren't valid votes? Correct. But we saw those things, and that's one of the reasons that that pushed us and the other parties to make a move towards putting an application into the Caribbean Court of Justice, because we were very concerned that what was adopted strategy from then on, basically, what Lowenfield has taken it upon himself is to simply dispose of 115,000 votes, and we don't know what he's done with it. And he has declared a result which has reflected nothing that corresponds to the recount. Now, we have to understand a little bit of what his job is. I've been saying it before, and I'll say it again. His job was to give the advice to the chairman. His sole job of giving the advice to the chairman was not about anything except the count. The count which was done, the recount, rare every day faithfully, and so many other people gave up their lives to sit there for 35 odd days and watch ballot by ballot being recounted. There is nothing that he has put in his declaration that is reflective of that. He has adopted an equally mythical way of fantasy for him to get his numbers, as Mingo did, because he wants to say that he could determine what's a valid vote. But firstly, he has no legal authority to do that. Secondly, on what evidence did he make these determinations about valid votes? And third, did he give anyone a hearing? Did he actually see evidence? Did he have proof? On what did he do these things? This is entirely arbitrary and should never be tolerated. And then what we have is, following yesterday's hearing and the movement towards the Caribbean Court of Justice, there's this total argument about what is going on, about jurisdiction, about all these issues. But I assure you that these things are not taken lightly. APNU's movement to the Court of Appeal was very unusual. And the Court of Appeal, in fact, said what everybody knew, that it meant valid votes. Why would APNU supporters have been so happy, and why were they so looking forward to what would happen next? It must speak to an unholy alliance between APNU, or members of APNU, and the Chief Elections Officer, because why would they think that when he was told valid votes, he would simply discard 115,000 votes? That was a very unusual thing to do, but we are where we are. And just to correct Leonard just a little bit about what the notifications that I see around, the CCJ's position is that they will maintain the status quo as to what it is at the time of the filing of the proceedings. Just so that we know, that's not exactly a stay of execution. It's just think of it this way: it's a freeze. You know, when you're a kid, you play 1, 2, 3 red light. Well, it's red light time. So everything stays as it is until they have had an opportunity to hear the case and determine the issues. It means now that all this while, after everything has gone on, and all the rhetoric that we will obey the recount, we will obey what GCOM says, we will obey, all of this rhetoric has now gone through the window. And we are again grappling with courts and trying and persuading courts as to what simple words mean. It's not a happy place. It's not a place that anybody could have envisaged that this is where we would be now, but it's where we are. And if you notice, it's a slow creep that has gotten us to this place that we are. The disregard of the law has become blatant, almost. The flagrant breaches, the action of government, the disposal of state funds that Kaieteur News was copying. What is going on in Guyana that you would have thought a mere few years ago would never happen, is now happening? It seems we have no public officials that we can rely on to do what is right and to follow the law and simply do their job. Everybody wants to do something more. Everybody wants to add. I know you like to say no spin, but unfortunately, I think the public service are all Shane Warrens. This is what it is.
So, Council and Rhonda.
If I may, my apologies to break in like this. There's a very strong statement that is coming out now from the Organization of American States, and if I may, just a few minutes, let me just go right into it. The OAS has accompanied the March 2nd general and regional elections in Guyana through all its stages, including a national recount in Georgetown from May the 6th to June the 8th, 2020. OAS observers were present for the determination and tabulation of the total valid votes cast in each region, totals that were subsequently confirmed by the Chief Elections Officer and submitted to the Guyana Elections Commission. GCOM is therefore already in possession of a result based on valid votes cast on March 2nd, 2020, through a recount exercise that was approved by all stakeholders. In these circumstances, the OAS General Secretariat expects that anyone who wishes to challenge the validity of those votes should do so through an election petition filed in the High Court. After GCOM declares the election result based on the recount data, Guyana's 2020 election has been reviewed repeatedly and extensively by both the nation and regional courts. While the OAS General Secretariat advocates for the right of all citizens to access electoral justice, there is a fine line between the right to redress and the use of the courts to stall the electoral process. It's undeniable that this election has gone on long enough. The process in Guyana must be brought to an end based on the results of the national recount and with respect to the will and majority of the electorate. The OAS remains committed to the strengthening of democracy in Guyana, hoping for a just and fair conclusion of the current process, full stop. That just came out.
Thank you. And that just speaks to the world keeping tabs on what is going on here. We expect and we are certainly looking forward to see what else will start up tomorrow. And we'll keep that in mind. Rhonda and Sanjeev, today I explained something to our viewers and listeners, which I'd like to share once again, because it is something that is important for viewers and listeners to understand. Look, Lowenfield has taken on to himself to be judge, jury, and executioner. And in the process, he has executed 115,000 voters' votes in this country. In other words, what I'm saying, APNO AFC has made an allegation to say, here are some irregularities. No investigation was conducted, not at all. As an example, I'll tell you this. There is a well-known attorney at law in Guyana. His name is Dave Kisoon. His serial number was one of those numbers that APNO AFC objected to. And they said, this number, this person is out of the country and could not have voted. That accusation is in Lowenfield's report. He threw away the whole box because of that. Nobody thought to ask or put a public invitation or anything like that to say, okay, you want to investigate? Investigate. So that Mr. Dave Kisoon or others like him can come in. In addition, Lowenfield said he don't have in his possession those documents from those polling boxes, from those boxes. We all know, we have seen the videos. We have seen the documents there with them. And I hate to say this, the police would have aided and abetted them by putting everybody out of the GCOM building to leave them to do what they wanted to do. And so today, Lowenfield can say, what documents? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any documents with me. Mind you, he didn't say the documents are not in the possession of GCOM. He said he is not in possession of them. Nevertheless, he has decided to be court that listen to an allegation, take no evidence, and make a decision and slaughter 115,000 votes in this country. Mr. Datidin and Rhonda Lamb, both of you were there in these recount centers. Have you seen any evidence that would have come your way for all of those allegations made by APNO AFC in their fishing expedition? Sir and ma'am. Ma'am first, sorry.
I actually spent most of my time in the tabulation room. So I would have heard every single observation report. I would have heard all of the allegations. I'll give you the example of my box. Unfortunately for me, for that particular box, GCOM had decided up to a certain point they would only record the serial numbers that were ticked as voted. Interestingly enough, every single lamb in my box was queried except for me. So they did all the lambs before me, they skipped me, and then went on to the others. However, because only the ones who were ticked, were recorded. Thankfully, none of the overseas lambs voted, or I could just imagine the headlines. I know a personal friend of mine. She is a young professional. She works every single day at the hospital. She's on Facebook. I've seen the day when she voted, and they literally queried her and said she was out of the country. And the only reason she went out of the country last year was to represent Guyana. So we have a situation here whereby I know at least 8 people on a list that was submitted to the police commissioner who has said to us, these people were out of the country, they were out of the jurisdiction. And these 8 people I know for a fact because on E-Day, everybody was inking up their finger and posting it on Facebook. So they not only do they have proof that they were in the country on the day, they have inked fingers to prove the point. But again, as TCI, we maintain our independent stance, and it's something, and I've said to the members of TCI, I said to Shaz, I said to Ruel, I said to all people, I said, let's go looking for these things. Let's investigate it ourselves independently. We know of a situation where there's a box in Mahika, 6 persons objected to. When the media went to look for these people, those people are in the country right now. You know, they voted. One gentleman, he left for sea the day before and his wife swears for him. So every single time we try to independently corroborate these allegations, we met walls of logic, walls of probability. We come now to those documents that we're talking about with the POs where they received instructions. One PO produced WhatsApp chat to substantiate his positions. That has not been disproven. GCOM has never come out and said, we don't know what you're talking about. Another PO said she received instructions. All GCOM said in response was, a DRO sent an email. He named himself. Both of those POs named themselves. All we have from GCOM is that there's a letter with unsigned DROs. Nobody wants to call their names. Nobody is coming forward. So as persons who are sitting here and applying logic and reason, we're struggling because if, the argument, if one dead person voted, then the whole election is null and void. What we have here is a situation where we can find, I know at least 8 people who've been accused of being out of the country and in the country. And therefore, if we're applying that kind of logic, then obviously I have to say, well, if I can find 8 people who are in the country that I know personally, then your allegations have no merit. So this is where we are at this point. Then, of course, that body slam that came with the CARICOM report. When I kept saying identifying voters by serial numbers is an infringement on their privacy, people jumped down my throat and they said, you're PPP, you're this. And then they're sitting in the CARICOM report is literally the same argument I made days, before that report, not even days, a whole month before that report came out. So every time we've independently tried to verify these allegations with the limited resources we have, we keep finding these people. And they're showing up and saying, I was here, I voted. So where does that leave us? And then, of course, the magical numbers that 2 weeks ago, these numbers were not valid, and suddenly they're valid votes. What process did you use to validate them from 2 weeks ago with your first report to now this report that you've submitted, where suddenly, instead of 285,000 people, you validated 180 something thousand votes? What process did you use? How do we believe you? Correct. So this is where I'm at. Correct. And, in order to answer your question.
Correct. And how do we believe you? Actually, you have answered one of the messages we have received. Because let me just pick this one up, Leonard. So Janelle is saying that, can you speak to the issue of BJ blocking house-to-house registration and of party members outside polling stations, sharing ID cards, stealing ballot boxes, etc. So Janelle, how do we believe you? You lied. The recount showed that Mingo stole votes. Yes, go on.
But Yog, your viewer who wants to know about that is simple. It wasn't anything about Mr. Jagdeo blocking house to house. Understand this. Our legislation has evolved, and we now do continuous registration. We don't do house to house registration anymore. So what should be happening all the time is the register is continuously updated from time to time. So there is no need to do house to house, which is a very expensive and lengthy process. And know this, in 2018, in November of 2018, there were local government elections where everybody had a satisfactory list. That same list, when the no confidence motion happened in December, then was still valid until March the following year, or April the following year. So what it would have meant is there was a valid list, because the list has a value date, meaning it's valid for a period, it's made for a date, and it's valid for 6 months. So it was there. Now, house-to-house registration, if you were to embark on a full house-to-house registration process, it'll take at least a year. And a year is if you're at flat out work pace. It will take longer because you have to go and you might have to go to an area several times. Some people might not be home, might be on holiday, might be at church, at work. That is why you have to go so often. So if that were done, then we wouldn't have even had elections now. The delay, the only reason that APNU and the coalition wanted to do house-to-house registration was not to clean up the list that they allege. They wanted to do it to delay. That's all it was. Secondly, the allegation that was made was that about Mr. Nandlal handing out, I believe everybody's seen the video about giving ID cards. That was nonsensical. He was there, he answered for himself, and he categorically said that that was not true. There is no evidence of any of these things happening. There was none. So to say that these things, as a result of this, we had a bloated list, no, we don't have a bloated list. In fact, if you were to look around the Caribbean, Barbados, I believe, has the highest. I think Barbados voters list is close to 85% of their population. And there's a reason why that would be. And you ask any electoral officer and any lawyer who does electoral law, they will say to you, the hardest task is to get persons onto the list. But the job is to get people off the list. Because how do you know? Other than if you have debt, and if you have a certificate of debt, then their name should be removed. But you have to put that in the context of the security measures which exist at the place of poll. We have a polling officer. We have 3 clerks. We have scrutineers from the 2 main parties, and if possible, from the other parties. We have observers. We have a folio. Your picture must match. We have your name with your ID number. So usually your ID card has to be used. Everybody in the room has to agree that you are who you say you are. These are not methods that can be easily fooled, because Guyana has had a history of rigging of elections. So we really do have a very high bar. Now, think of the logic. Not only must you get an ID card, if that's what you're alleging,
Right.
you must look like the person who's on that ID card. And even if you want to say that the ID card was illegally manufactured, then what happens? You would actually have to find your picture on that folio to match the one on the ID card and to then match you. So realistically, how would this have happened? And on what scale would it have happened? And then comes the kicker. What would you do with the ink on your finger? Are you going to ink the next finger and the next finger? What are you going to do? You have to show your hands before you vote. Then we have all sorts of issues that,
Correct.
You could do this to put this on your hand and it wouldn't be there. But what did you do to your face to make it match the voter? What did you do with the picture in the folio to match the voter? What did you do with the ID card that you invented? You have to understand. And then you have to have, in that whole scenario that I just told you, Yog, you have got to be able to do these face changes, these ID card matching, the folio, and removing the ink. How many times are you going to do it in one day? Correct. And where are you going to go from place to place to do it? These things are preposterous. And every time you try to do it, that's what they're saying, on every occasion that you try to do it, you would in effect have to get everybody in that polling station to agree to allow you to break the rules.
Mm-hmm. But
how is that even possible? You see, these are where the preposterous stories come from. Correct. And Ray will tell you that everything was going very smoothly, almost to the point, and I don't mean it in a bad way, to the point of boredom where we were falling asleep at Ashman's building. And it was boring, Yog. It was ridiculously boring when all of the statement of polls were being put up onto the screen and everybody was seeing it. It was monotony on stilts. But then what happened? All of a sudden, for no reason, no explanation. The first thing that Mr. Mingo said is he was tired, we're starting back tomorrow at 9 a.m. For no reason. For no reason, we stopped. And everybody started to get suspicious. The next morning, there was no 9 a.m. restart. Mr. Mingo fell ill and went to the hospital. And then the persons who came there to continue, they had a spreadsheet. And they say they keep going into a room and coming back with a spreadsheet. And we were thinking, shooting out the statement of polls instead of this tally sheet. Because clearly it's slowly, you are saying that you're putting the numbers on the tally sheet.
Right.
But we would like to see the spread. We would like to see the SOP because the law says we could see it. Then we started to say, these do not match the ones we have. Surprisingly, Ray was there. She will tell you, the APNO representatives that were in the room, they had a spreadsheet too. And they were saying that the numbers that were being called were matching what they had. And they didn't want to bring any SOPs with them. They said it was easier and less work. I mean, they're entitled to do that. But that's what happened. And then we went to court. We had to have that stopped. And Mingo said he never saw the spreadsheets at that time. He didn't actually do the numbers. His people did. Now, we then go back around. And while that should have stopped, Ray was there. While it should have been stopped, and we were in court. We thought everything had stopped. They were moving at an accelerated pace, hurrying to finish these things using the spreadsheet. And then we went, of course, to Kingston. We all know that it was in bright sunlight with a white bed sheet, the sun behind you, and a projector. No one could have realistically seen what was going on. And then it turns out in the recount that he invented nearly 20,000 votes.
Right.
Now he added 20,000 votes to the list, and Mr. Lowenfield subtracted 115,000.
Correct.
But does anyone, it is such a major issue, but no one in Guyana anymore is concerned that Mingo's first declaration, the numbers did not match his second declaration. The first nor the second declaration matched the recount numbers. And Mr. Lowenfield's first declaration matched none of the previous ones. And his last declaration, which he made, matched none of the previous ones. None of the previous three. So we have had 5 different sets of numbers that have come out to GCOM. We've had 2 from Mingo, 2 from Lowenfield, and the recount. And none of those numbers are identical. The only thing that is identical is the numbers that are declared in the recount and the numbers that the PPP said are on their statement of polls, and what they said the counts are, those are identical. But Yog, you have more mathematical acumen than I do. And you do know that if you were to do a recount, there would be minor changes. There would always be a few here and a few there, a number here, a vote here, a vote there, because a spoiled vote might be deemed to no longer be a spoiled vote. These sorts of things would happen. But there can't be variations of 115,000. There can't be variations of 19,600 votes. It can't be those sorts of numbers. But so it is clear to me that GCOM, the public officials in GCOM, are not inclined to produce anything that is reflective of the votes they have or the voters' will. They just make up the numbers as they see, and they try this one. And then we have to go through a whole circle. All the while they sit in power, selling state land and doing all the other things that they shouldn't be doing. This is the most ridiculous thing ever. GCOM has come up, 2 GCOM officials have come up with 4 completely different numbers. And nobody says, well, what happened to the ones before?
Correct. And Sanjeev, the reason why I think Rhonda would have mentioned that, and I'd use that line too, is viewers and listeners, we need to appreciate and understand that there are a number of us that continues to listen to the narratives, and without questioning it, we are allowing ourselves to believe it. So what Mr. Datadin and Ms. Rhonda would have outlined is exactly what transpired. And I wish to remind you there has been a gentleman from APNU AFC who has said, I saw one person voted twice. Really? I wonder why the police didn't call him in. Where is the police? You know,
He
so
should
they
have given a statement. He should have given a statement
Correct.
to the police. He should have
Correct. You know, so we understand the mischief and we understand where it's coming from. And we are seeing, you know, what's the ultimate aim? It is to have power at all costs. Sanjeev and Rhonda, I want to come right down to what is it today and what impact do you two feel Lowenfield's this latest report has, if any at all, keeping in mind your approach to the CCJ. But before going there, let me just say this, ladies and gentlemen, we need to continue to be vigilant but calm. Do not allow yourself to be drawn into any challenges on social media. Do not allow yourself to be drawn into any irresponsible statements on social media. You are seeing people who are just cheerleaders. They're not allowing their brains to work. All they're doing is parroting whatever is being said. So don't follow them. Listen, learn from our guests here and others who continue to keep you up to date. So over to you two. Rhonda, I would like to ask, what's your party's thinking at this stage? I know that you two would have retained counsel. I'm hoping it's pro bono, but I know that you two would have retained counsel to get this matter to challenge the matter of yesterday in the Court of Appeal, and your thoughts of what transpired there and where we go from here.
As of today, yesterday I instructed, you know, through Shaz and all the others, TCI's position is clear. The insertion of the word valid votes suggests that every other election before now we were counting invalid ones. So that insertion for me has implications. We've, met with our counsel in that sense. And so we're concerned about the insertion because that is putting words, into a constitution that more or less was pretty straightforward. And so our position is clear on that. And then, of course, there is still the matter of the fact that we now have two courts claiming jurisdiction for elections matters. And so we would like that cleared up because, again, it's Guyana, and therefore, for future, we would like it absolutely clear what is the position, how the statute should be interpreted, because depending on the side of the status quo you're on, you get different interpretations. So that's where we're at with regards to that. When Dr. Jaglio and filed his writ at the motion at the CCJ, we were named as respondents, and of course our TCI's lawyer has been instructed to prepare our affidavit in response to that as well. So that's where we're at with the legal items. This evening, as you rightfully said, there is a stay on the matter, and therefore we're expecting that to come tomorrow officially. And then, of course, we wait for that full hearing on the 1st of July. Interestingly enough, as you said earlier, and this is something us sitting on the outside looking in bothers us. We had a situation where a statutory officer of this country who is designed to work for the people of Guyana just got word that there was a motion going to be filed, and he dropped arms. Today, despite a 3-day stay, starting from yesterday and onwards, he submitted a report with numbers nobody knows where he got it from, and numbers that were inflated from what were valid votes before. So that's where we're at. Looking on, it seems that we have to have the reworking of the Constitution, the rewording, and constitutional reform was something we campaigned on, and it looks like we're going to have it. We're going to have to narrow down nitty-gritty. If this happens, that. If that happens, that. So that there is no confusion in terms of that. So that's ultimately what TCI's position is and why we joined as a respondent to the appellate court when that motion was sent off.
And if I may,
Correct. Thank you.
If I may ask the good counsel that then, sir, could you tell us whether Keith Lowenfield, as Chief Elections Officer, acted in contempt of the stay that was granted yesterday by the Court of Appeal by submitting his report today to GCOM?
Well, let me answer you this way. Contempt of court really takes on a connotation that having been served with an order and warned by a court official that you have disobeyed.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just give you a little example or a little bit of more of an explanation of what I mean. The policemen of the court are the marshals. They are like the police of the court, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
What they would do is if the court makes an order, the police of the court comes to you and says the court has made an order, a judge has made an order. And if you were to disobey it, then they will come to you to enforce it. Now, as I understand it, the stay order was made, but the only way that you would be in contempt of court is if you were actually served with the order by a marshal personally. These are requirements because the punishment, as we all know, for contempt is very likely imprisonment, and a lesser offense would be a fine. So in these circumstances, I don't know whether Mr. Lowenfield was personally served with the order, and I don't know whether there was the penal memorandum attached to it so that the technical requirements that are required to establish contempt was made. What he did, however, is in the face of a court order that is made with a stay of execution granted is unusual. It may be just his choice that that's what he wanted to do, but it would be unusual that the stay order, because the stay is entitled or was entitled to keep the status quo at what it was, so that no one would do anything further to advance the positions, because that was likely to complicate matters more. But he chose to do it. So in the strict legal interpretation, I don't think it would be a contempt. But to answer Ray, who would like constitutional reform, and I agree with her, constitutional reform is required. But usually to amend the Constitution, you require, in very little circumstances, very little substantial circumstances, would it be simply a simple majority in Parliament. What is usually required is a 2/3 majority in Parliament. But apparently when that fails, you can go to the Court of Judges. They are quite willing to amend the Constitution for you. So maybe we can have that approach. It's easier. It's less troublesome to do for you. But that's clearly what that precedent is intended to create. But I agree with Ray but I also say this to you. To those of us who are lawyers and to the general people who could understand English language, I think it's pretty clear that when you read the Constitution, what is intended and what is meant. What we have found ourselves in is some kind of vortex of really odd circumstances. And by that, I mean odd in the extent that what is actually going on is plain words, plain maths is being disregarded in favor of fanciful meanings and fanciful interpretations. And the rest of the country is taken along on this joyride. And if you keep doing that, it doesn't matter what you put in the Constitution. They will say that 33 is not the majority of 65. And how do you prove that? I mean, it's beggars belief as to what is meant. But yes, reform will help. But what is more important is there must be stronger, stringent, and condign penalties for public officers who will look at a statute, who will look and read a statute of their obligations and choose to do their own thing. Because you see what happens is the only way you will do it is if there is no consequence that you really fear that you will face. And that's what needs to happen. Electoral officials must understand. I'm not in favor, I'm not a great one to imprison people. I've never been in favor of anything to do with imprisonment. But I do believe that fines and confiscation of property should be more prevalent, because those are the things that will make people think twice about what they are doing. And you cannot pay people to run an election and spend $8 billion of taxpayers' money to end up with what we are. Now, look at what is going to happen. I don't mean to say that you're not allowed legal representation. Most lawyers, you speak to each other, you assist your colleague. If your colleague asks you, sometimes you're the one assisting them, sometimes they're assisting you. That's the way it works in the community of lawyers. But I'm telling you, on the day after tomorrow, when the case management is going to be heard at the Caribbean Court of Justice, I would like you to have a look at the number of lawyers who are going to be appearing on record for David. And I would like you to have a look as to where they have come from. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have foreign lawyers. I practice in several jurisdictions, so I would not be the one to promote that. But I will tell you that in Yolita Moore's case, there was distinguished senior counsel from Grenada, Trinidad, and there will be again. You look and you see, and you will realize that that's only possible by the state, this state, funding that litigation. And that is reprehensible because the leader, the Granger, is saying one thing to the public, and then he's sending out his officers to do other things. You look at who the lawyers are that are involved to represent David, and you will understand why. It is reprehensible. It is something, if you want to fight, you could fight. You could say that, look, we wouldn't accept it, and go ahead. But don't lie to the nation. Lie to the nation repeatedly about these things. And where are we now? We are going to go through another court case. We're going to get another ruling. We're going to have words in that ruling. And God help us, because they are going to make those words mean things that you never, ever thought they meant before. And that's what's going to happen. This is a never-ending delay tactic, which is being attempted. And it should not be tolerated by the people, and we must put an end to it. This is desperation. Because, I mean, I cannot believe that public officials would stand in the face of everyone and do the things that they're doing. Lowenfield must know by now that not only all of Guyana, but he must know that the world, the observers, governments, the diplomatic corps are looking at what is going on. And he will still, without a basis in law, arbitrarily remove 115,000 people from the vote.
And if I may counsel here, if I may butt in here, there is a statement coming out here from the Caribbean Court of Justice, and I'm not sure if you've gotten it, Yog, but it says here, it's dated today's, and it's CCJ issues order to the Guyana Elections Commission to ensure fair hearing. And I read the first three paragraphs. The Caribbean Court of Justice this afternoon issued an order requiring the Guyana Elections Commission and its officers and agents take no step to prejudice the fair hearing of an application made to the court by Mohammed Irfan Ali and by Jagdeo. The steps prohibit, and I repeat here, the steps prohibit, including but not limited to, declaring the results of the Guyana Elections Commission held on the 2nd of March 2020 until the CCJ issued final orders following the hearing and determination of the questions raised before it in the said application. That is what I should tell you guys with regards to that statement there. Any comments?
Well, I tell you what has happened. I think a little earlier, Yoga asked what was the effect of Lowenfield's report. Well, you've just read what the effect of Lowenfield's report is. Because essentially what had happened is this. What Lowenfield has now done is he has committed. He wrote a letter that said, in the letter, he said specifically that in reliance of the ruling of David versus GCOM, he had calculated valid votes, and these were his figures, and he did all of it then. So, with an application in the court, in an environment where people were saying, I mean, the APNU supporters are saying that there is no jurisdiction in the court, that there is no way that the court could have anything, I assure you that when the court is seized of a matter and one side is trying to steal a march on the other, that's never looked at lightly. And I don't only mean the Caribbean Court of Justice, I mean any court, anywhere. It would be like if Leonard was the judge of a dispute between myself and Yog. And while it is going on, Yog keeps doing all manner of things that he shouldn't be doing. Even before you hear me, you will say, well, listen, man, it's in court. You should stop what you're doing so that we could resolve the dispute.
Right.
But the effect of him doing what he did to disobey, well, not entirely disobey, but to try to advance the thing and to try to move things forward, what he has done is he's put the court in a position where they have to maintain the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And they have maintained the status quo by saying to GCOM, do not do anything while we're hearing the matter.
Okay. So, Counsel, over the next couple of days until they stay, it looks like for another week then, nothing will happen where these elections, nothing else will happen until the completion of this matter?
Sad truth. Essentially what will happen is this. I guess what the court is doing is the court would have had most of the record. I know that the PPP side has done that. Our side has filed most of the record into the court, and that's been done. But I know that what will be the major issue is they will want to give a few days for one side to put in submissions and another few days for the other side to put in submissions in response to that. And any replies might be a day. So they want to give everyone a day or two, to put their work together and to put it all together. And once they do that, the next step will be that they will conduct a hearing. So a week is, it's about the time that I had anticipated would be taken. I thought it would be a week or less. So it's roughly a week that they would do so. But that's because they recognize what is going on, and the court is going to do its very best to try to bring some sanity to the madness which we have. I only hope that between now and the time that the court hears and delivers a judgment, that we don't find ourselves with more developments and more drama while all of that is going on, because that will only serve to complicate matters again as we would have it go forward.
Right.
So I hope that the parties obey the order. I know from past dealings with the court that the court doesn't take very lightly to disobedience of its order, much more so than the local courts. Our local courts are there. Our local courts are a little more tolerant and forgiving. It's not that they allow it to happen. They're just a little more tolerant and forgiving. In my experience, the Caribbean Court of Justice is not so. They are very, they expect that if they make an order that you obey it. So I don't anticipate that anybody will disobey the order, but I'm saying that I just hope that by the time that is heard in a few days' time, we don't have all these interesting, quote-unquote, developments go on of great drama.
So, Leonard, I want to put this at for your deliberation, sir. I cannot ask our guests, either of them, these questions. But as a journalist, I can throw it at you. So it seems like a year ago, Guyana had to go to the CCJ to learn math. And today, you see why I didn't throw it to Rhonda, because she's come from the school system, right? So today, we are going to the CCJ to learn English. So we have a problem in this country with math and English. So Leonard, here is my second one. Do you think, Leonard, that the moment the respected members of the CCJ heard that this thing was going to the Court of Appeal, they started to gear themselves up for action.
I think if they had some mathematician the last time, this time they're going to have some English teacher. That's all I can say about that. I
And
plead the fifth
finally,
after that.
jokes aside though, Leonard, from a serious perspective, I just got this message, and the message was deemed to be asked of counsel, but I'm not going to ask counsel this. Look, the message reads that Mr. Datadin, but I'm going to say Mr. Gildari, a year ago, Jagdeo accused and said publicly that Mr. Lowenfield was the recipient of approximately 216 acres of land. Do you think that Mr. Lowenfield is doing all of this to protect his land and his deals or whatever it is? You don't have to comment, Mr. Gildari. It's an open question.
I know Sanjeev is raring to go that.
No, I'm not going to ask counsel that question at all.
Well,
I understand it's called Millie's Hideout.
But let me answer it for them. Let me answer
Yes.
it for them. You see,
Millie's Hideout.
you see a lot of things coming out. You even see things on the judges. You see things on the chief election officer. You see relationship between judges and whoever government officials. How do you deal with it? This is open season. This is election season. However, the populists they're not stupid. How does this figure out in the court? But you have the judges out there in terms of the people and their reading. It's difficult for you to put those things into the newspaper and even discuss on radio because of the laws that we have here with libel and slander and all kind of things. And Sanjeev would know about that because we've been slapped with a couple of that. But at the end of the day, you see these things circling a lot and you wonder. And the Guyanese people are wondering because after that court case yesterday, there were many things circulating about relationship with certain people in the judiciary and otherwise. And even with Mr. Lowenfield in itself, that issue did come up with the lands, and I think he did answer it and say these were issues that were or applications that were made years back. Is it believable or not? That is up to the populace. The jury is still out on that. Maybe, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it at that.
Well, there does seem to be some incestuous or questionable relationship between various persons, within government circles. And Leonard, during the day, you and I have been questioning some of those deals, some of the sales of assets and lands up at the East Coast, and all of those things that we see are coming to light. Rhonda, I want to come back to you on something. You spoke earlier of the impact of COVID-19. While this government has opened itself, made its intentions very clear of wanting to thwart the will of the electorate. They want to steal these elections. And Lowenfield is giving or wants to give to GCOM what the electorate did not give. Wants to give to APNO AFC what the electorate did not. Rhonda, given yourself as a mother, a teacher, a politician, what do we tell our people, knowing that there is new messages and new information coming to us, that some public servants have not been paid since May? That's one. And two, people across this country have been out of a job since March. There has been a lockdown. People are not working. People are starving. What should have been the priority of this incumbent while these elections are being thwarted or delayed?
Sure, you want me to answer this?
You're asking a lot of questions to different people tonight.
Listen,
Please.
I have personally, I've made my position very clear. I have begged every single human I know for donations. In fact, I've been cracking jokes all throughout the political season that I call it the argument tax. If you want to argue politics with me, it's going to cost you some hampers. So my position is clear on it. You can fight. I've been fighting a political end, and at the same time, we've been implementing, relief measures. I've not seen the same fervor attached to the relief system in place for our people as I've seen the fervor attached to holding on to power exclusively. Mm-hmm. That is my opinion. for TCI, it has always been about the people. It will be about the people. And we're ready to fight anybody for the people. For their will to be respected, for whatever it is they put in those. Nobody has proven any ballot in any ballot box to be fake. We sat in the recount station and we saw those ballots being scanned, and we've not seen any ballot that could be considered a fake ballot, meaning there was stuffing. What we saw were statutory documents from GCOM, and GCOM has to answer and investigate where those documents are. You cannot disenfranchise a population who, like you said earlier, stood in the sun and voted. And they voted with a particular intent in mind. Thankfully for the recount, a lot of folks' votes were actually included this time around, because initially POs erred on the side of caution, and those persons' votes were not tabulated. So for me personally, and I'm pretty sure this is the TCI position as well, because I've not heard any of our executive argue differently, our priority has always been the people. And therefore, I expected to see, with the same fight that we fought for power and to hold on to power, the same people we are claiming that we are supporting and we're in support of should have received the necessary attention during the period, as we fight COVID. It should not have fallen to ordinary citizens of this country going delving into their pockets to sustain, a movement. That is my position. I make no bones about it. Tomorrow morning, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for what I've said tonight, but my position remains clear. The same power, the same speed and energy you use to fight to hold on to power, the same speed and energy our people should be receiving assistance. And they need it desperately.
Right. Thank you. Council, I want to come back to you on the matter of the elections. One of the persons has sent in a question. They're saying that CCJ does not have the power to stop GCOM. What's your comment, sir?
Well, join us on day after tomorrow and tell the court that if you really believe that. I cannot imagine that what has been going on is so many people, and they don't read the statutes, they don't read it, but they have an opinion based on what their friends or what someone else says or what they believe logic is. If I assure that whoever your viewer or your listener is the CCJ will not do what they're not authorized or empowered to do. So if they do have the authority, they will do so. If they do not have the authority, rest assured they will not. So they don't need to worry, and they don't need to get into a contest or a shouting match about what it is. Rest assured, if the court has the power, they will exercise it, and if they don't, they will not exercise it.
Thank you. So, Council, a week or two ago, I had invited you for us to have a discussion in room 592. But I think it was felt that maybe the discussion might have been a little premature and that we may be driving some people scared. I think that advice was bad because the people didn't care whether the discussion happened or not. And that discussion, Leonard, was supposed to be, can we, the people of Guyana, jail them for them raping the electorate of this country and rigging these elections? That conversation we never get it done. But I would really like to challenge Council to say, come forward a day and let us have an open discussion and let the population know whether we can take civilian action, whether we can take class action, what type of action we can take, because this is too much and there is no end in sight. We don't know what card APNU AFC is willing to pull out of their sleeves tomorrow or the next day. Obviously, they will try to delay this further and further again. So can I ask you, Council, to please consider and let us have a date where we can discuss whether we can jail some of these people.
But I thought today was the payback for missing that day.
Not at all.
I still owe you for that one. But
Yes.
Yog, let me tell you the simple answer. We could look at it in several ways, but it is easier if we look at it from not the cause but the effect. The essential parts of the offenses would be you can't be a public officer and you can't forge records. Meaning, you are obliged to compile, keep, maintain, and distribute where required your record or the extracts of your record in accordance to some level. It is held to some level of accuracy. So there are several offenses that would relate to that. You cannot produce fake documents. We all know what forgery is, but forgery extends to a little bit more of that. You cannot also, as a public officer, do an act that is intended or designed to defeat the purpose for which your employment is. There are specific offenses about that. And so if we're to look at the effect about the various things, it would substantially amount to this. They're fraudulent documents that are being produced, because these documents are not reflective of the true figures and the records that are in the possession of these persons. I know that those persons are saying, or at least in the case of Mr. Lowenfield, he appears to be contending that he has determined that what his record reflects of valid votes is not indeed the record of valid votes, and he's entitled to correct that. So there are issues that arise with that, but there are also electoral offenses. There are offenses that relate to the election specifically, such as electoral documents, defacing electoral documents, defacing electoral materials, and misrepresenting what those materials are. So there's another whole series of offenses. The ones that carry the big penalties and the big hitters, if you like, are the conspiracy ones, because they could be conspiracies, both statutory or common law conspiracy. The common law conspiracy would relate to things like misconduct and misfeasance. Well, it would be, there is separately misconduct and misfeasance in public office. I think over the past 5 years, we've heard that a lot, and we understand what they mean. When you're a public officer, you cannot conduct yourself or conduct the business, the affairs of the office which you hold in a manner that you either seek to benefit from it, others benefit from it, or you are not doing it in a manner that is the way it should be done. So there's misconduct or misfeasance, depending on whether some statutes, but the English one is misfeasance in public office. But then there's the conspiracy, and it's the conspiracy to commit fraud, the conspiracy to commit, if you like, the forgeries of the public records, or to do X, Y, and Z in relation to those public records. Now, those are all offenses that would relate principally to public officials, because public records are really the province of them. But they could include civilians, meaning non-public officials who are also involved in that. All right. Now, there are a series or a layer of offenses that go as to inciting the public, misleading the public in circumstances where you should not. And those would really relate to things like a declaration saying that these numbers are correct when you know that that's not so. Saying your SOPs say this when they don't actually do that. So there are all of those sorts of matters that you need to do it. But I mean, principally, there are a whole host of things. But principally, what this is fraud. This is electoral fraud and forging public documents, because people are taking it. I know they will take it upon themselves to say that they have a right to decide, but you don't really have a right to decide. You see, on a fair interpretation of the advice that Lowenfield is obliged to give, he is really only obliged to give advice about those numbers that Ray sat and tabulated for the 10 regions. He really has to add them up. That's really all he's supposed to do. He's not to give the chairman, he's not expected to give the chairman of GCOM advice on how to drive a car,
right?
What properties are good investment, what stocks she should buy, how to train a dog. This is not what he's hired for. So we have been caught into this vortex of really stupidity, because what is being advanced is his advice is his advice. No, his advice is not his advice. And there is a logic to legislation and the legislative scheme. And I think I've been through it a bit before, but it's worthwhile going through. 177 says that if you are the leader of the list with the most votes, you are deemed to be the president. So you're elected, deemed to be elected the president. So the first thing that happens, you get the most votes, you're elected the president. But if you think of the reality of the situation, you can't simply walk around the place and say, I am the president who got the most votes. I mean, the first thing is most people are not going to believe you, or how would they know if to believe you? So what this Constitution provides is if you get the most votes, you're deemed to be the president. But deemed to have been elected the president requires that it follows, it requires that that you follow a declaration. But who makes the declaration? It can't be just any person, any individual, the man standing on the road. It can't be. It must be the chairman of GCOM who makes the declaration. So a statutory officer is charged with a duty. But in an effort to create some transparency, it can't be the statutory officer asks who? Could ask me or Leonard or you or Ray, what are the numbers? No, there must be somebody who is charged with keeping track of these numbers and actually having them. So that's the CEO, elections officer. So what is required, that declaration that is made is relative to the deeming part of who's elected. So your declaration should in fact be of the numbers. And your advice is a legal term that really means to say, well, you're to give to the chairman the advice for the declaration. So the advice for the numbers. There is no power, and it cannot be imputed, that you would decide on what numbers it would be. It's already decided by GCOM. If you look at all the SORs, they say valid votes. And that's what they've written down on those documents. For the 10 regions, they were tabulated by officials at GCOM who accepted those things. So that's what Lowenfield is supposed to do. He is deliberately not doing his job. And
Council, if I may just stick a pin there, just to remind everyone that there are, as Leonard Gildari would have said earlier, that these allegations of votes that are not valid is not the fault of the voter. It is the same Lowenfield who is the CEO, the head of the secretariat, the employees of GCOM that would have or not would have complied with their instructions. And so the people's votes must count. And remember when this process started, everybody said, let every vote count, let every vote count. So God knows how much the narratives have changed. Council, I know you may not want to comment here, but there has been a lot of calls. And the reason I've asked you about the jail time and whatever penalties can be brought to bear upon these people who are willfully, doing their fraudulent actions. Leonard, as you know, you and I have received...
You'll be reading some of the legislation,
Leonard, as you know, some of
disobedience.
Yes,
Leonard,
as you know,
see what he's been doing.
Gotta teach me some of these things here.
I've had good teachers. I've had good teachers. Leonard, we have received calls here that since there is a problem, there is an obvious problem, and Mr. Lowenfield's most recent action shows that there continues to be a problem. A public call is now made to the US Embassy, the British Embassy, the Canadian embassies, that please, before these people do their mischief and escape this country, their visas should be revoked because the people of this country plan on taking legal action until the courts so decide whether GCOM was complicit or not in these elections. They need to be held here. And so all their traveling and all their visas ought and should and must be revoked. And that is one of the petitions that is currently underway to the US and the Canadian and other embassies. Leonard, as you know, we have had a lot of calls asking us for something like this.
Absolutely. And one of the things we would have seen it day after day whenever we would have had it, not only from the embassy and so on making statements, but people have been calling us, people have been writing, they've been commenting, and up to today I think a lady has made it very clear, let it go wherever it goes, we'd have to deal with it, but we can't contemplate an legal government in place. But I want to ask, because a lot of people are wondering right now, Council and also Ms. Lam, where are we at the moment in terms of timeline? Could we, let's assume that everything goes well, the Caribbean Court of Justice make a ruling. How soon could the people of Guyana see the swearing of a president? And I'm very careful in that, whichever president it is, how soon could Guyana see, based on what is happening, what is going to be heard in the court, and after that? Do we have a timeline in our head?
Leonard, I think we have an understanding already. We filed only this morning.
Mm.
The court has indicated the case management, and they've made the preservation orders already. They are going to do the case management proceedings that they wish on the day after tomorrow, which is Thursday.
Yes.
They are then going to go on to a full hearing next week, Wednesday, I believe, is the first.
Mm-hmm.
So they are going to hear that very quickly. In the past, I could tell you my experience of having gone to that court. They move very quickly, and given the speed with which they are addressing the matters, it obviously is because they recognize the national significance of what it is, and they are going to proceed to their hearing. You can expect that we should have a ruling shortly thereafter. It's not going to be a very long process. My guess is that once that ruling is made and once the way forward is clear, that we are going to have the situation of whether or not we have any more invented obstacles to a swearing-in taking place. But if we were to take it simply by the court process, I would say shortly after the hearing, a matter of days, a few days after, the process would be ready to get forward. And whether that happens is entirely a matter as to whether we find another contrived circumstance, whether there is now there might be additional litigation, whether there are, other issues that would be engaged.
Right.
And to be honest with you, Leonard, I have gotten very jaded over these past 100-odd days, and I'm likely to believe that given what is going on in terms of the absolute desire to hang on to power, and given the extent to which public officials are literally committing harry-carry, I wouldn't say that we're at the end. I hope we are. But I'm saying that, honestly speaking, I can't think of anything else that could possibly, once the court case is done and once it is clear that the recount data must be adhered to, I can't see anything standing in the way. But I couldn't see a lot of these. I couldn't see Mingo standing on that balcony. I couldn't see the fanciful reports that we're seeing from Lowenfield either. So I hope.
Thank you.
On this occasion, I'm not wrong.
Well, those very sober words, let's hope that things do come. But ladies and gentlemen, that is a very sobering reminder that not until the 1st of July will there be any traction. And I wish to remind everyone, while we are waiting now for that, the squatters continue to squat in office. Mr. Granger continues to be the chief squatter. And while they're continuing to earn their fancy salaries, driving their fancy vehicles, and abusing state assets, coming up with all kinds of deals to steal state lands. Meanwhile, children and people of this country cannot get a meal to eat. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of government that wants to remain in office at any cost. Guyanese, remember, we can forgive, but we must never, ever forget. These nightmares must never be allowed to repeat in the future. Rhonda Anlam, thank you for being here, ma'am. And your closing comments, if you don't mind. Mute. Please unmute.
Unmute.
Forgive me, I'm a cynic. So while Sanjeev is sitting over there and, he's saying, it's hard for him to see the end, I will believe literally when I see a president being sworn in after a declaration that we've actually come to the end of this process. Persons say, well, why are you so cynical? I'm 40 years old. I have not lived through, persons tell me about stories from the 60s. I wasn't born then. And so what I have seen within the last 113 days is a disregard for the people, a disregard for the same citizens we claim to be representing, and therefore my cynicism abounds. And until such time that the president is sworn in after a declaration, and we have that, I am going to believe, I'm going to prepare, and I would advise the people of this country to prepare for more drama, because that's what we are. Right. We are, and I'm going to repeat this again, we are a politically immature people, and as such, we find judicial solutions for political problems, which ideally we should be conversing with each other, and we should be having, the people's interest at heart. And I have not seen that within the last 113 days. I've seen quests for power. I've seen quests for, power at any cost. And our people should reject that. They should reject that completely. And any incoming government should be warned that the people's voice, and this might sound very cliched, but the people's voice is important. We've been sounding it. It is time we let them know that we are the important ones and what we want and how we want them to govern. And we want them to govern for every single Guyanese, for every single son and daughter of this soil. So those are my parting thoughts. And forgive my cynicism, but I've lived 40 years and I've seen a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. And I wish to add, if I may, I would want to correct one little aspect of what you said, that, there will be something else happening. I wish to add this as I open for Council's closing remarks, that what will happen, Council, it is expected that after this CCJ part will be over and GCOM will now go to declare, there will be another court challenge with another attempt to bring an elections petitions even before declaration. I think we have not seen the end of this. But Rhonda, my correction would be that in addition to being political childishness and whatever we want to describe it, the truth is it is pure, raw greed for power that we are seeing on display every day. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what you call a dictatorship, ready to usurp power from the people at any cost, even if it means thwarting the will of the electorate. And that is exactly what we have here. Council, over to you for your closing comments.
Yog, I totally understand what Ray is saying, and I am not surprised that many persons that I know share her sentiment. And the phrase that I hear a lot is, I will accept that it is over when I actually see that the president has been sworn in. And we are 100+ days beyond. And it's beggars belief now, because what has happened at first was a clear narrative that the numbers Mingo is declaring are what we have in our SOPs. Even Hans Gaskin said that's what he was told. Then we had the second situation that followed that was every vote must count, and we must have every vote counted, and we will prove that we won. Now, they knew from their statement of polls that they didn't win, but they went into that with a clear plan of making as many frivolous objections as they could. Now, after the objections had been made, it then came that you have to disregard all of these votes. And they spent every effort they can, the APNU coalition did, trying to discredit as best they can that dead people and migrant people, they were migrant voters and they were dead voters. That's what they were. That's what their story was. They had no proof. They were unconcerned about proof. And if you look on social media, their loyal and faithful supporters are being misled. Granger is literally lying to his people to save himself and his cronies remaining in power. He is lying to them, and they're believing it. Maybe they just want to believe what he says, but they have to certainly see the truth of it at some stage, at some point. We then had all these court cases that are coming up, and really and truly, valid votes being counted is a declaration to that effect ought not to have changed anything, because it should have always been valid votes. That should have been a win for the nation, because the will would have been respected. But look what we had less than 24 hours later. The chief elections officer does not have the same view of valid as you or I have. And there must be a reason for that. There's speculation about land deals and this and that going on, but still, why would a public officer hijack an entire nation and thwart the will of the people? And there are so many people who are working behind the scenes to try, or not working, or who had worked behind the scenes. So many people with the training of elections officials, the printing of the ballot papers, the ballot boxes, waking up early on that morning, getting the ballot boxes out, staying late to get the ballot boxes to the centers. There were so many people who worked and are associated with GCOM faithfully and did their job. But it's clearly the bosses who want different things, and they are unconcerned about reality. I cannot believe that Mr. Mingo or Mr. Lowenfield are under any illusion that there will be consequences for what they have done. But they've still done it. And that must be because they think that it would succeed. Correct. That must be what they believe. And that's a very sad day when public officials believe that they can do as they please and they can just do so with impunity. I really hope that we get the opportunity to breathe again. The country gets the opportunity to breathe again. We have so many more things. We don't have to agree about everything, but we should respect the will of the people and respect each other. Your view does not have to accord with mine, but I should respect your view. But it can't be that what you want to do is to simply make things up, whatever you feel like. You've lost an election, but you would hold on to power. I have actually been looking over the past few days and reading a little bit about regimes that have held on to power having lost an election. And so far, I can find none that is has done so for as long as this government has. I'm not finished. It's not an exhaustive thing, but it is something that I'm looking at, and there has been no election where it has been in these circumstances that the other side has been able to hold on. And we must ask ourselves, why is that so? Is that a failing of law enforcement? Is that a failing of our public officials? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's both the public officials and law enforcement that's failing us.
And Council, if I may, very quickly, I know that we're running out of time, but there is a flyer that is around the place that is basically quoting the Caribbean Court of Justice Act number 16 of 2004, and it was assented by the then president of Guyana, by Jagdi, on November 30th, 2004.
This is section 4.3.
I think it's a 4.3, which says nothing in this act shall confer jurisdiction on the court to have or to hear matters.
There is a provision of the act.
Could you,
Leonard,
if you're familiar with that, could you respond to that?
Yes,
what is it saying?
There is a provision of the act that speaks towards that the act will not give jurisdiction to the court if a statute says that the court does not have jurisdiction, meaning the appeal in the Court of Appeal is final. But you have to understand this, Leonard. That is what is known as an ouster clause, or a clause that ousts the jurisdiction of the High Court and the Upper Court. And ouster clauses are narrowly construed, and jurisdiction is very important. Now, the arguments that the PPP advanced, and in fact, quite a few of the respondents, is the court had no jurisdiction because there was no enabling legislation passed to enforce Article 177 as there is with 163. But there was also, if you read the plain language, it only applies, or it only can take effect when the president is elected. Now, they're not complaining about Granger's 2015 election. And there is no president elected in the 2020 election as yet, because there's been no declaration. And the Constitution provides a definition for what it means by elected. You have to have been declared the president. So the application was premature, and the court did not have jurisdiction. So if a court does not have jurisdiction, it has not made an order within the statutory power given to it. Therefore, the order is ultra vires its jurisdiction. An appeal would lie. That's the simple answer. If the court had acted within its jurisdiction and done the right thing and interpreted the section that said, look, he had to be elected first before it comes, then fair enough. There may have been an argument that there was no appeal by Section 4.3. But Section 4.3 cannot apply where a court arrogates unto itself jurisdiction under a provision which does not give it.
But that's your opinion. I'm being the devil's advocate. That's the opinion of the opposition.
You're not an advocate, much less a devil's advocate. The advocate is below.
I know. But I'm putting myself for the other half of the
issue
people.
would be, the issue is and would be, Leonard, that will be, as I understand from all of social media, that will be a very live argument that will be raised at the court whether it has any jurisdiction.
Correct.
However, I have no doubt in my mind that the approach that will be taken by the court will be within the confines of the law. Whether it is that they agree with me or they don't agree with me, whichever way the court is to decide, the Caribbean Court of Justice. That's why I said in a response to your previous caller who said they have no power to tell GCOM what to do. You can rest assured, if this court has jurisdiction in these circumstances, this court will take jurisdiction in these circumstances. If this court does not have jurisdiction, this court will decline the jurisdiction. So rest assured, whether I am right or not, we're only a few days from finding out.
Right. But counsel, right or not, ultimately it comes right down back to GCOM, because whatever the court says, Lowenfield can continue to display his own translation of everything and give the commission these same numbers. Now, should you...
He can't actually, because there's a funny thing that is in existence now. In accordance with the statutory powers that the commission has, the commission directed him to present the data in accordance with the report, in accordance with the recount data. He took it upon himself to say he was going to follow an order that is stayed for 3 days. So he is really acting in contempt of GCOM's order. I mean, GCOM is not a court, but the direction that his superiors have given him, he is disobeying at present. He should obey. Now, the court did not strike down, and the court did not change or interfere in any way. Those were orders that indeed were asked for, and the court refused those orders.
Good. So shouldn't
DCOM's direction to him is what he should be following.
So shouldn't you and your colleagues be taking necessary action to get the court to now translate the word valid? Because on one hand, the word valid, based on what Miss Lam would have said earlier, all the certificates of tabulation has valid votes. So the total number of votes of the recount are deemed valid. Yet Lowenfield has now decided that the word valid means something else. So shouldn't you guys be taking some action to enforce that what the word valid means under the circumstances?
I suspect that would be part of the arguments that Senior Counsel Douglas Mendes will be fashioning. I mean, he has his own unique style. He's very effective, as we all know, and we have witnessed. But I mean, the arguments and the style of arguments is entirely going to be his. But I can assure you that this issue and the jurisdiction of the court are going to be fully ventilated.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, Counsel, that was a long closing argument.
Indeed.
And we know we have pulled you away from your family, and Miss Lam, we have pulled you away from your family too. But, you know, Guyana is where we will invest what we will invest on, vest to our children, providing any of it is left by these politicians. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, do keep calm, remain focused, and know that people are looking out for our best interests. And here in room 592, we're going to continue to unleash the truth. And I know Mr. Gildari will be right back with you at 1:30 tomorrow for Elections Watch, right, Leonard?
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to be there. And of course, Yog is not taking a time off like myself and the rest of the staffers. It's coming down to the mountain, and those boys will have to be paid. And they will be paying us as well. So I think it's a private joke. I think I'm going to tell Sanjeev that in a very quiet way. And of course, Ms. Lam, you don't understand the joke, but let me tell the world what it is. The boys in the studio wants to hand over the salary to us. We've been working very hard so we could give it to the people of Guyana. So we are going to be doing that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Good
Sanjeev,
night.
Thank you so much.
Good night, Joe.
Have a great night.
Good night, Leonard.
Thank you very much.
Rhonda, thank you so much. My co-host, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been good to have you once again. Well, not really good, but, you know, it's not good because the bad news continues. But where there is a will, there is a way. This fight, we shall never give up. The will of the electorate will be respected by those in power. Never again let us remember these willful acts of this current administration, and never again allow the politicians to run your lives for you. We must realize as a people, we got to run their lives and run them out of office when they don't perform. And when they refuse to come out of office like now, we're going to use every effort possible, calling on the international communities as we do now, and calling on the world to help and get the parasites out. Mr. Squatter, please vacate the people's office. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been good to have you in room 592. Do say a prayer for this wonderful country of ours. And I do hope God would forgive some of the sinners. We continue to pray for one and all. We love you all. From room 592, we say have a wonderful night. Goodbye now.